Good afternoon to everyone, and thank you for choosing to spend your afternoon here with us. For those who don't know, I'm Patricia Faber, and I do a podcast show to help people maximise property values. It's called Maximising Property Values, and it's on your popular platforms: Apple, Spotify, Google, Audible, and some of them you can actually access directly by clicking on the link above. Now, that, however, usually is just a monologue where it's just me talking to myself. But since November, 17th of November to be precise, I've added a guest series. And my guest today is Bushra Mohammed. We are going to get to know Bushra a little bit better today. So, who is Bushra? Who is Bushra? So, Bushra is a property solicitor. Bushra qualified as a property solicitor in 2006 and has worked at specialist property firms in the past, dealing with predominantly high net worth clients and investors on a variety of matters. She takes particular pride in her smart auction pack legal services that she gives to clients who don't have the knowledge or insight needed to go through the legal packs associated with property auctions in order to reduce the risk before they bid. In addition, Bushra is a regular contributor for a property investment magazine and writes articles on auction legal packs and conveyancing. She also enjoys giving educational talks and webinars for property investors. Bushra has also been a landlord for the past 13 years, and as an investor too, she understands her clients. She understands their concerns and she can communicate her solutions with ease. That there is Bushra. So, Bushra, welcome to Maximising Property Values. But before we go into your main activities, we would like to get to know you a bit better. So, you are a solicitor. People don't really understand solicitors. They don't know what solicitors do. They don't know how solicitors tick. They don't know how solicitors think. But solicitors are also human beings. So, I'm going to ask you two questions which may well help inform people a little bit better about solicitors and help people to remember that solicitors also bleed, solicitors also breathe, solicitors hurt, solicitors laugh, solicitors cry. So, number one, what's the most challenging thing that you've experienced as a solicitor?
Hi, Patricia. Thank you so much for inviting me, first of all. So, what's the most challenging thing I have experienced as a solicitor? I think the most challenging probably thing that I've experienced so far today was probably the SDLT holiday we all had last summer, and the influx of instructions we had placed a lot of pressure on myself, my team at the firm, in just trying to manage everybody's expectations. And there was a point that we just said, that's it, we're going to cut off this and set this date and say we're not going to take on any more instructions. And in every single transactions, we said, look, we cannot guarantee you're going to complete in time for the SDLT holiday, because as you're aware, and everybody else is on this channel, that it takes more than one person to tango in a conveyancing transaction. So your solicitor will be doing their utmost best to move the transaction forward. But if the mortgage offer, the valuer, the other side solicitor, they're not all collaborating together to get to that deadline, is going to be very challenging. Fortunately, we were in a very good position that all our clients that we envisaged would meet the deadline did, but it was very, very stressful. I was working flat out 7 days a week for nearly 7 weeks, I think, up until that day. And then obviously the aftermath after was just assisting the team on any post completion matters. But it was definitely the most challenging thing I've had to experience. And the thing is also was that I had only renewed my practicing certificate the year before, after a career break. So not only was it I was in a good position that I had refreshed my memory on a lot of things. I attended a lot of courses on the law side to renew my practicing certificate, but it was just uh, an astonishing amount of people making queries. The amount of auction legal packs queries I had were astounding, because I just thought, gosh, is everybody really believing that this SDLT holiday is worth it? I don't know. We're still going to wait and see whether people do believe they paid good value for those properties. Some probably would say yes, but I read in an article earlier this year that a lot of people probably paid more than they saved.
Do you know, I've been laughing away in the background behind my mic. So, just to give us, like, to put this into context, how many open cases were you actually dealing with at any point in time, perhaps at the peak of this period?
Oh gosh, it's a tricky one, because we have so many that are live matters, pre-completion and post-completion. So I would say the live matters uh, probably close to 40. Yeah.
Ooh, 40.
Yeah. And the
Oh my
thing is,
God.
people don't appreciate that. And it's one of those things that is one of my goals, is to educate the investors, the new buy to let landlords, the new buyers and sellers out there, that a conveyancer's job is very complicated, and people often underestimate the complexity of how much we need to know. We don't just need to know how to, it's not just a checklist that people often think we're doing in the background. We have to have so much other background knowledge, whether it be planning, and SDLT. That's just another huge issue that we've got to tackle as well. All the other duties we have as a solicitor is not just to you as a client, it's also to your lender, it's also to our professional body. And there's also another whole load of legislation we've got to abide by for the Council of Mortgage Lenders, the CML handbook. And every day we're working on a client's file, we're being constantly thinking about, of all our duties that we have to check, the so many things within a file, the ramification for our client, and of course for our profession as well, our individual liabilities on the line as well. PI, our professional indemnities, going up every year. There's always something going on in the background with somebody slating their solicitor for having delayed their transaction or so forth. But people don't always appreciate how much stuff we're going through as well, just to get a property over the line. But nevertheless, those things happen. But majority of our clients, I would say 99% of my clients, have been very grateful. They're very great in terms of speaking to, collaborating with, and moving our transactions forward. And we always get so much joy. I personally get so much joy in terms of completing every property. And as an investor, as a developer, I know what it's like to be on the side. So I empathize that much more. And I believe I try my best in terms of communicating with the client, in terms that I understand, they should understand, and just giving that kind of service that I would want as well.
Whoa, 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 whoa. Okay, so your second question is this, and it's literally the flip side of what I've just asked you. So, what is the most heartwarming thing that you've experienced as a solicitor?
Oh, I think, to be honest with you, it's been really heartwarming majority of the time. The last, what, two and a bit years since I renewed my certificate. And I think I'll just base it on that. And I would say I've had such heartwarming messages from so many clients and other fellow investor developers who've had a great experiencing on watching my webinars, several of my auction webinars I've done, conveyancing webinar. I've done quite a lot of work with Ranjan Bhattacharya, and I regularly get lovely messages on LinkedIn, on Instagram, saying, Bushra, I really enjoyed your webinar with Ranjan, or this webinar that you did for X networking group. It was really useful. And those messages mean so much to me. People don't realize and just think, oh gosh, that's one of those things that I really get a lot of kick out of when I do this presentation, to try and educate people, and so that they don't waste time, money, and effort and energy when they go to an auction, and they can help themselves as much as possible. I mean, I appreciate, just as an investor, it's not cheap to just quickly send a legal pack to your solicitor to review. And if you can do as much work as possible yourself to kind of minimize how many auction legal packs you want to send to your solicitor, then all the better for you. I went through about maybe 20 legal packs last month for myself, not for a client even. And I just think, well, wouldn't it be good if another investor could sift through those legal packs themselves, just to say, well, I know a little bit of basic knowledge. Obviously, I'm not expecting any fellow investor to have the knowledge I've got and the experience I've got, but the basic knowledge that everybody should have before they start bidding. And with the crazy amount of bidding I've seen in the last 2 years, I, I'm astonished how and why people are bidding on certain things. And every time I think, what did they see that I didn't see, or are they a complete fool?
Wow. So, Bushra, please educate us, because this is going to last forever. It's going to be on Clubhouse, and it's going to be published as a podcast next week on Wednesday. So please tell us, share with us, because hopefully people who will come back and listen to this can learn from it. And then I'm sure they're going to have a question or two. Then they can come back to you. So if people want to contact you, first of all, how is it? How do they contact you? What is the best route for people to contact you? Is it email or Instagram, or how?
Yeah, so I'm quite active on LinkedIn and Instagram, as you may know. So the best route would be to first contact me via those channels, and see where we want to go from there. Then I can just advise you in terms of the next step and give you my email address and take it from there.
Great stuff, great stuff. So please give us a masterclass on what they
Oh
should know
gosh.
before they come to you.
How many hours or days have you got, Patricia, for this podcast? So every time I do a webinar on auction legal packs, I say this is not going to be a 3-year law degree. I can't condense it in 2 hours, because it wouldn't be fair on you or me. But just to kind of summarize, give you general knowledge in that sense, when you have an auction legal pack, my clients always say, well, first of all, usually the first question is, how much is it going to be? Well, the answer is, well, how long is a piece of string? I know it's a cliche, but the thing is, I give a very bespoke quote to each auction legal pack. Obviously, I've got some sort of tier structure and a different variety of sort of bits that you would add on in terms of what the property is. But what I say is, first of all, send me a link to the auction pack. Let me have a quick look at it, because no auction legal pack is the same. No property is the same. Very rarely are they going to be identical unless you buy a new build house. But then in those circumstances, still, the individual buyer is going to be different. So once I get the legal pack, the person will email me. I'll have a quick look. So the first things I will do is look through the legal pack, see whether it's a freehold property, a leasehold property. And then within that, obviously, first thing you'll notice is whether it's residential or commercial. Then once I've done that, I'll go through all the documentation, a very quick overview, and then send a quote to the client and say, well, this is how much I feel it's going to take, um, and this is my quote. And obviously, all along, I'm going to say, well, depending on when the auction is, whether I've got capacity to do it. And if you're telling me the auction is tomorrow, it may be very difficult. I've actually had somebody call me on the day of the auction and said, Bushra, let's talk through this legal pack now. The auction starts in 1 hour. And I had to say, sorry, that's not how it works. I can't really literally drop everything in a second and go through a legal pack with you on the phone right now. I've never met you. Um, so what I would advise everybody is, please give your solicitor plenty of notice before you instruct them for an auction legal pack service or any kind of review in terms of auctions. Conveyancers are extremely busy at the moment, and if you just help yourself by helping them and say, I think the auction's next week and I'm thinking of bidding, do you have capacity? you're going to be in their minds, and they can tell you straight away yes or no. Thank you very much for calling me. Yes, I'll have capacity. If you want to get it reviewed today or this week, let me know. But if you win and that's your risk, if you don't have it reviewed, then I can take it on as an instruction as well. But going back to the auction legal packs, so for example, if I were to review an auction pack, legal pack for myself, what I would do is, first of all, is of course download the legal pack. That's very easy to do. You go to the auction house website, download the legal pack. Now, just be very wary that legal packs change and get updated all the time. So one day I'll click on the legal pack and it'll have 3 documents. 3-4 days later, it'll be updated and it might have 10 more extra documents. So all along, you've got to be very on your alert to see and try and make sure you register for the alerts to say, okay, when it gets updated, you'll get an email notification straight away. But the main structure of a legal pack is that you first of all should always expect to get the office copy entries from the land registry. So that is usually all the documents, everything about the property, the owner itself, and anything that affects the property in itself. For example, notices, restrictive covenants, and those type of legal positions where you must be aware of if it's going to affect the property. Now, on a few occasions, if you don't get an office copy, that could indicate it's unregistered title, and that is very much more complicated and more risky, because you have to then prove that there's 15 years clear title, which is called epitome of title. So it really does take a lot more time. It is high risk, and you have to make sure that the legal pack obviously shows all the documentation to show that there's been clear ownership 15 years going back. Because if you are successful at auction, your solicitor may or may not have difficulty in registering that property in your interest, and doing that first registration. So then moving on, once you've got the office copy, read that thoroughly. That's a really important document. You should also expect to see searches. So that would be the normal, your water and drainage search, the environmental search, and the local authority search. The local authority search is very important. It will tell you all the local land charges against that property. It'll also tell you some very important information about the area where the property is located. For example, if it's a listed building, if it's in a conservation area, if there is other things that affect the roads, for example, if the roads are adopted as a public highway. The list goes on. It's a very lengthy document, and you should obviously read all the documents in detail. The water and drainage search is very important because it will tell you if the property is connected to the water mains, whether the surface foul water actually drains to the public sewers. There's been several incidences where people have bought property and they didn't realize it wasn't even connected to the water mains, and then realized afterwards they've got to spend X amount to actually now connect it to the water mains. The other documents are also you need to be aware of would be for example, if it's a leasehold property, make sure you get the lease and read that thoroughly. Other documents might be, depending on if it's a commercial property or a residential property, you may get additional leases, for example, if there's a sitting tenant in a commercial premises. So make sure you read that as well. Now, obviously, how you read a lease for a commercial property is different to how you read a residential lease. So I don't want to bore you all in how that differs as well, but just be aware that there's different kind of terminology within each lease as well. So you need to be aware of all the rights that for example, a residential tenant will have, in terms of being still in the property, because you need to know whether that tenant is going to still be in the property if you buy it, or have they already been given notice that they need to vacate when the property is being completed. The other very important point I will mention is the special conditions. Now, this document is probably the first document I always read. Now, this can vary from auction house to one auction house, and some auction houses are quite nice, I would say, is that it's only 1 page long, but the other auction houses maybe be 5 pages long. And within that, some of the clauses in that can be very onerous on the purchasers. So you must read that in full, because it will contain the clauses that you need to be aware of. For example, if you are successful, you will have to pay an X amount to the seller for searches. And this amount could be up to £1,000. And a lot of people may not be aware that they have to, count in their analysis for an extra £1,000. The other point is you will have to pay a portion, which might be a percentage of the purchase price for the other side, the seller's just legal fees. And it will be written usually in words. So it might say 2.4% of the purchase price to the seller on completion. So you will then need to account for that percentage in your analysis to say, well, gosh, that's quite a lump sum. It will be 5, 10,000, possibly more or less. That you need to account for quite a lot, a chunk of money to be able to pay the other side as well. The other points are also very important in terms of you have to do your due diligence, and you basically, when you read the special conditions, you're agreeing to the fact that you've inspected the property, you're aware of certain things that might be present at the property. For example, there might be Japanese knotweed, for example, at the property, and if you don't know how to spot that, you've agreed that there may be present weed there, and you may have to account for a certain amount again to eradicate the Japanese knotweed at the property. Other clauses will be there that you need to just be aware. For example, if there's any damage to the property between exchange and completion, you will be liable. The list goes on in terms of the clauses. If you just go down to any auction house website, and you can just get a feel for it. I always tell attendees at webinars, I think before you decide to bid on anything first for your first go, just get a feel for an auction legal pack, read it, familiarize yourself with it so you understand the terminology, the wording, and then just speak to your network and ask them, have you bid on anything before? What do you think this means? And just understand and get confident in terms of understanding the documents that are in the legal pack, and then also be very aware that what documents might not be in the legal pack too. I've reviewed so many legal packs that I get a bit quicker now each time also to spot, okay, I'm looking to buy this property, but I don't believe this property had planning permission or building regs. So there's no document in the legal pack, and I can't even see it on the planning portal. So those are things that I will alert in my report to the client to say, well, I think you need to take a risk on this property because these documents are missing. If there's any guarantees, for example, fence certificates, these are missing. But then also giving a solution saying, well, depending on if you're buying with a cash or a loan, a lender, your solution might be you get indemnity insurance. Or if you can't get that, what other solutions would there be? And even in some instances, I'll say, I think this property or this lot is far too risky. I don't think you should go ahead. And if you do, that's at your own risk. Other things would be if it's a planning development a lot, for example, and you'll get a transfer document. And within that transfer document will be several clauses that you will be signing to on completion day as well. So you need to be aware of, for example, overage rights and overage payments, which are payments that if you go ahead with planning permission on a development site, you will need to pay a portion to that owner of the land. So a previous client, a developer, she wasn't aware of it. So I did a review of her auction lot, and she was grateful that I was able to spot a couple of very important points that just didn't make the deal worthwhile. What other things I'm trying to think?
Do you know the one thing that comes to mind, Bushra, and you might remember some other things as well, is okay, so how easy is it for people to actually understand these documents? Looking at a lease, it's like words and words and words and words, and then
Yes, no, I agree
You,
with you, Patricia. Even as a solicitor, my pet peeve is a lease that has no grammar, no punctuation in it. That has to be the biggest pet peeve, and along with the archaic handwriting in calligraphy. As much as I appreciate art in calligraphy, it's really difficult to read. I often need my magnifying glass on hand just to read some of the documents, and rereading certain documents two, three times is not unheard of, because if you have a document, for example, 1 page long, not a single comma or a full stop in sight, it is very difficult. And then on top of that, you will have some archaic language, or the grammar will not be as easy to follow as it would be in everyday layman's language now. It is a challenge in that sense, because then I will have to maybe read it, proofread it one more time to say, does that make sense? Or can I flip it the other way around? Does that make sense? Okay, now, okay, let me report to the client on this point because that seems more relevant if I interpret it in this way. The language is not always obviously easily understood. I appreciate that. But I think it just comes down to practice. The more you see these kind of documents, the terminology, the more you get used to it, I think. It's like with any profession, really, I think.
so what about these clients who are going to be reading these before they actually send you their links and the auction pack? I'm feeling sorry for them, and I feel sorry for you as well, because it's one thing that I I've never been able to read leases ever.
Mm,
Certain clauses I know where to find and I go
yeah.
look for them, but to read a lease from start to finish, I don't think I've ever done it ever,
Oh,
ever, ever, ever.
you're
So I
lucky
do.
then, Lee.
You've got my sympathies. You've got my sympathies.
I,
What? So
I've I've got better actually with leases. It's a tricky one. I think you've got to be in the right mindset, right mind, um, in the right atmosphere as well to be able to just focus, because you do need to have a be on the alert, I think, with leases. And if it's, of course, if it's a commercial lease or as a residential lease, you've got to have the right mind, the frame of mind, sorry, to understand, okay, how am I reading this? How am I interpreting this? And if it's a commercial tenant, what does this mean now for my incoming tenant who's going to buy this property with a sitting commercial tenant lease? Does there's certain acts, for example, the 1954 Act, which will give the current tenant the right to extend their lease and stay in the lease as well. Otherwise, they have to go through a certain procedure if they want to um, not stay in that lease. So it becomes a bit more complicated in that sense. So certain things are okay. I've had a lot of leases in terms of the old housing association purchases that clients have had. You just need to be a bit more wary of certain things that are in those. For example, you need to understand if there's any payments that need to go back and be paid to the housing association or the council. But because they were so long ago, I've not had one single client or person that they could then get that liability passed on. For example, a lot of clients, probably not before my time, but probably round about when I was maybe a younger girl, a lot of people bought their properties with the council and got a huge discount. Now that discount, it doesn't always eradicate, it stays with you if you were to sell the property, but only within a specific period of time. So we do need to do certain checks in terms of that there's no ongoing liability to go to a new successor in title.
whoa. Right. So you said earlier that people can contact you on Instagram and LinkedIn. So let me just share your Instagram link. Now, these pins in Clubhouse, they're not very good with pinning other social media. It just usually just
Sure.
says
I
your
think
pin is not allowed.
I think if you go to, I'm not sure if I haven't updated my bio in a long time. So if you go to my bio, I think the
Right.
link tree should be there. Let me have a look now, actually, if I can.
Oh, your link tree. Oh, wonderful, because I can post that then. But in the meantime, for people, Bushra, Bus Sierra, that is,
Yeah.
HRA underscore property interest. So Bushra underscore property interest. That's how you get to Bushra on Instagram. And in the meantime, we're going to try and I'm going to try and post a link to Bushra's link tree. And then you'll be able to kind of like access all of her main links. So going back to these special conditions, what is the highest amounts that you've seen a seller asking buyers to pay by way of buyer's premiums?
Oh, I would say it's about an actual amount stated, probably about six or 7,000. Usually it's stated in words, so it can catch people off guard, but it usually is a percentage, either 2.74%, or it will say £6,700 or something like that. I'm just guessing. I think it was about that much. Maybe I'm guessing. I wouldn't be surprised if there's more on some other lots, but there's quite a huge amount that people, if you're, say your property is only 200k guide price, it's quite a big chunk, I personally think, to then pay the seller for literally doing nothing, I think.
Oh, do you know, I completely agree with you. And literally, some people don't even realize that they've got to pay that. And then
Hmm.
they get to completion, and then they're faced
Exactly.
with a completion bill. So this really, people, if you're listening to this is why you need somebody like Bushra who can go over your auction pack for you, because it, otherwise you're being penny wise and pound foolish. You think you're saving money, but you're not really, because you're actually going into something that you are not prepared for. Because if you know that you're going to have to pay like £10,000 costs, you should
Yeah,
then work that into your maximum price
of
that you're going
course.
to be bidding for that property. Otherwise, you're going to be overpaying.
Of
Oh,
course.
Bushra, tell us about some howlers that you've seen people buy in
Oh,
auctions.
well, I can't really comment if I have not seen anybody
Oh,
buy anything terrible in auction because I
oh,
never
yes,
meet
that's
them.
true. Okay, what about
So I would say,
non-clients?
like, the things. So none of my clients have fortunately bought anything stupid, because I would have told them otherwise. But I would say, like, there's been several instances where I've warned them, and luckily they didn't go ahead with it. For example, something comes to mind is when this developer, he was going to bid on this plot of land, and literally the day before, very sneakily, the auction house then uploaded another document to show the transfer document to stating that the actual plot of land is now going to be cut in half, and you'll be bidding on the new outline of this property, which is literally half the size of the actual office copy registers plan. So the unwary person, or person who might thought, okay, I've read all the legal pack, it looks fine, and not checking it the day before even of the auction house, auction day, sorry, um, you will not realize, well, actually, you're buying half of what you think you are buying if you don't keep reading all the documents and be up to date. That's happened on several occasions, and it's quite common in land purchases. I, in fact, looked at something and bid on something a couple of weeks ago, where it was a house and a very large garden, but in the transfer document that was also in the legal pack, it stated quite clearly that the new part that you're buying would be only the house, and the garden is going to be separated on completion. So they're basically splitting the title on completion if you were successful at auction, and you wouldn't be getting the garden. And obviously, as an investor developer myself, I was thinking, oh, that's a great plot, a lot. I'm going to bid on that one, because I'll get the extra piece of land, you can develop it, do so forth. But luckily, when you go through the documents, you think, oh, it's not as good as I thought it was going to be. Maybe I'll just lower my ceiling price that much more now, and it's not as worth I thought it was. But it still did very well. A couple of weeks ago at the auction house, I didn't get it, unfortunately, but somebody did. So all these lots, I find it very interesting, and unfortunately, can't see or speak to the person who wins, but I find it very interesting how people are now getting so trigger happy at home or on the laptop or wherever, on the mobile phones, probably bidding away. And I don't know. I'm maybe quite fortunate in the sense that I try not to get so emotional about the property or the lot, even though you've spent hours possibly on this one lot. Even, you know, you view it, you'll speak to maybe half a dozen professionals to get their opinion, you'll spend another couple of hours maybe going through the legal pack, another maybe hour doing the analysis, uh, and you are so almost committed to buying this lot because you think, well, I've got to justify my 2 days worth of work and everybody's fees that I've now paid for. But you've got to just say, well, that's also a learning process, because I've learned so much along the way. And if that's a loss, I wouldn't even consider it a loss, but it's kind of knowledge that you've gained. I don't think it's not a win or lose in auctions. You've got to then realize if you didn't bid or you didn't win, it's you win or you learnt from it as well. And I think I've been quite fortunate in the sense that I've bid on certain things and then just went up to my ceiling price and I thought, that's it, I've learned from this, but I'm not going ahead. The person who bought this, I firmly believe, is paying way too much, and it's probably has several times has paid probably the amount it would be when you've refurbed the whole property. And this is on a residential one. But several times I've realized, I just think, I can't understand how this person has made it work. There's one actually that comes to my mind. Just over a year and a half ago, I bid on something and the guide price was very low. It's only 150k, but you will never believe, Patricia, how much it went for.
How
It went
much?
it went for 1 million.
N- uh, uh,
Yes, yeah, 1 million. So
no.
I've got to put it down in my diary to go back to that address and see what on earth this person who bid on it is doing. Because I thought it was worth maybe 100, 200k because I had thought I had a plan, but 1
It
million.
wasn't. It
I just
it
thought,
wasn't a Thames Water sale, was it?
ah, I can't
Because
remember whether it was Thames Water now.
I've been because I a few probably a few years now, I was looking at some land, and it was owned by Thames Water, and again the guide prices were really low, no
No, it wasn't
reserves.
Thames Water. It was a derelict substation, I think.
Ah, they
Everybody
tend to
start
go for a
Googling
lot.
it.
They tend to go for a lot because, again, same with my situation. I think it was guided at maybe about 50,000, and it went for over a million. And I
Yes,
literally sat there with my jaw nearly hitting the floor.
yes. So this is the thing. I think you've got to be so emotionally strong with auctions, and you always do. I mean, even to this day, for myself, I do think, did I miss something, or did the other person really act foolish? Because you just have to wonder. I think I was speaking to a couple of other um, keen investors who thought, oh, lockdown, we've got more time on our hands. Oh, Bushra, we're thinking of now, bidding at auction. I said, well, just be very wary. And they're like, oh, we've watched Homes Under the Hammer. I said, well, that is not quite reality. You do realize that. But I think because I just going to viewings and the long queues I see now viewing properties, I just think this is very odd. And I just think these are not all investor developers. These are all clearly who just have maybe have got a bug in the last 2 years thinking, let's all go and bid something and do a little project if we can, which is fair play to them. But I don't know how much analysis they've done as well. And now it's just now I feel like I'm not just competing against fellow investor developer, first time landlord, but also the person who's just maybe sitting on a lot of cash and now wants a project.
Honestly, Bushra, you've just hit the nail on the head. That is
Thank you.
exactly what's happening right now, and it is scary, isn't it? Because the thing is, when people do their due diligence, I don't know. Uh, uh, you see, personally, I love the fact that we can now bid from home. Well,
Yes.
the last time I bid, we were able to bid from home. Because you see, when you're in the auction room itself, you get caught up in this atmosphere, especially if you're
Mm.
competitive. You forget that it's money and it's not monopoly money. and you think, I want this, I want this, I want this.
Mm.
And sometimes it's really, really difficult. But when you're at home, you can step back a bit. And I know that the auction houses, again, they're not happy
I
when
don't I
everything's
don't
online.
agree. Sorry, Patricia, I don't agree. I think it's
Don't you?
become too convenient to for
Oh,
people sitting
really?
at home and on their laptop, just a touch of a button. Literally, it was that easy for me a couple of weeks ago, last week, to bid. Literally, just tap a button, and if just by mistake, if one of my kids decide to touch it while I went to the kitchen, can you imagine? I just think I think it's far too easy to be sitting at home. Although I love the convenience, I think it's
Oh,
much easier now for people to be trigger happy in their pajamas, bid on property, rather than go and drive all the way to London or get on a train and be present in that room.
oh, do you know, one of the reasons why I say I like, this being at home stuff, I guess because my kids are now, well, my children, my offspring are now grown. I don't have that risk. The only culprit who could do that would be my cat. And I guess I'd lock him out of the room. But you can ring
Yes,
someone. Like, I have people who ring me and say, stop me, I'm bidding right now, what do you think? I want to do this, I want to do this, what do you think? And I'm going, once you get to this amount, you must stop. And then I'm watching
mm.
I'm watching their progress online as well, and I'm saying, do not go above, this particular number. So we're crunching the numbers,
It's
literally.
really hard. I lost
Oh,
out on a property a couple of weeks ago by £1,000.
but you see, the thing, Bushra, and this is what I say about this: um when you when you lose up by £1,000, it's not really £1,000, because if you'd gone back in, whoever got it
That's
would have
true.
paid more than £1,000.
Exactly,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah. Oh my goodness, oh my goodness, oh my goodness. Auctions, they, oh, thank you so much for sharing all of that with us. So, as I said earlier, you can get in touch with Bushra through her Instagram, Bushra underscore property interest. And again, follow Bushra, tap on her face here and follow her, and find out when she's next doing a webinar, when she's next doing a talk, and go and listen to this again. Come back, listen to the replays, listen to the podcast, because what she has shared today is just absolutely golden. Now, Bushra, talking about charges, so this is another document that I've never been able to understand. It bores me to death. So I'm talking, not charges, searches. So local authority searches.
Hmm.
Now, with some instances, especially if you're buying a probate property or somebody who's just gone into a nursing home, there
Hmm.
might be some charges attaching to the property, because maybe the local authority is paying the nursing home fees and all whatnot, or they have done that, or they've paid to upgrade the house with double glazing, or central heating, or whatever. Where do people actually find these before they come to you, or is that something that they should quite happily just leave to you to find and advise them on?
Um, I've not had that situation before. So in a probate property, we'd obviously have to get the executor document, a letter of authority from the executor, sorry. And then in that sense, we'll have a look at the office copy entries, look at the local authority searches, and check what charges there are. So if there's any outstanding mortgage, very rarely there is in that instance, but we'd have to ensure that the property can be paid off. Local authority charges, I've not come across in terms of what you were referring to in terms of what they may have upgraded, but we would have to do it. Obviously, we'd ask if I was acting obviously for the buyer, I would raise those inquiries to the other side and ask them, because that's our due diligence. That's the part of our duty to you as a client, and if you're buying with obviously a lender, duty to your lender to raise those inquiries to say, well, if there are these charges on the local authority search, if they have been upgrade payments made to this person, where does the So those are the things that I would then be really raising to the other side to say, well, how can we move forward in this situation in terms of anything that might be slightly onerous on the local authority search, with everything, whether it be a local authority search, any other search, any document. If you're unsure or I'm unsure, there's no harm in asking the other side for more information, for more clarification, just to reduce your risk and make your asset that much more valuable to you, and reduce the risk obviously to the lender.
Great stuff. Now, how easy is it to actually raise enquiries of the other side? And just in case there's somebody in the room who's thinking, okay, I can just write to the other side, or so the other side. By other side, what we mean is the solicitor acting for the person who's selling.
Okay.
So, how easy is it to actually raise enquiries of them? And is it advisable, if at all possible, for a layperson, so that is a non-solicitor person, a non-practicing solicitor, to actually raise such enquiries?
So are you referring to in an
Auction.
auction or
No,
normal
auction.
conveyancing? Oh, an auction. Oh, so if we're talking about an auction, well, I think it's going to be near impossible because the other side solicitor may not speak to you. I mean, there's no harm. I've never raised it because my role in those scenarios is to review the legal pack and do a report to the client. But if the client wants to then speak to the auction house, several times I've told a client I think you should speak to the auction house. I've a couple of times maybe said if you want to reach out to the solicitor, they may be able to help you. They can be, but I would say they're in very rare occasions they will assist you. um, I think it will depend on every property is different, every auction house is different. There's no harm in trying, I say. What's the saying? If you don't ask, you don't get. So in an auction house, anything goes, as far as I'm concerned. If you want to do it pre-auction or post-auction, I've asked several questions post-auction on a lot that I'm hoping to get replies on, because quite a few documents were missing in the legal pack a couple of weeks ago, and it didn't sell this particular property. So I'm going to ask for planning documents, some other questions that I wasn't sure about because there was no building regs I could see on the planning portal for works that were carried out. This particular property apparently was a HMO, but I couldn't see any building regs certificates. So I was just a bit wary of what my risk was going to be if I was going to purchase this property. So in this scenario, obviously I can see that the sellers are motivated. I don't know whether they will then now be forthcoming with the information, but I've asked, and I'll see what the auction house says, because I'm not gone directly to this lister. In this scenario, I don't even know who the solicitor is. I don't think it was even in the document. I could see it in the document. I think it'd probably be one of the searches. That's fine, but I wouldn't really want to go out of my way to contact them. I don't think that's probably professional. I would, in this instant, I would just go directly to the auction house. They're acting for the sellers at the end of the day. And I'm sure, acting for the sellers, they would want to pass on any questions if they want to sell the property.
Gosh, wow. I was just thinking back because I'm still shocked, and I think my brain is just coming to terms with what you shared with us about somebody putting into an auction a house and land, and then the night before they're making it clear that the land is not
Yeah.
included. isn't isn't that misleading? It, it's
I
just
don't think it's misleading. I think it's just the nature of auctions. So I I think with the auction house, you've just got to be on high alert and be very wary. You've got to be, I always say to clients and fellow investors, just imagine you're in basically investigator, detective mode. That's your job if you want to buy it from auction. You've got to constantly look at it 10 times, 100 times, just to be sure it is what you think it is. And the famous, well-known caveat emptor Latin phrase, so many of us will have heard of, is that the buyer needs to be aware. It's your duty to make those investigations, not the seller's duty necessarily to disclose everything in auction unless it's a deliberate misrepresentation. So it is very kind of front end heavy with an auction. You've got to do so much investigation, that you've got to then really put aside a lot of things. So literally the last 2 weeks I was so busy that I just kind of neglected any cooking for the kids, and thought, well, I need to read 20 legal packs because I need to kind of dwindle down which ones I'm going to definitely bid on, and at what ceiling price I think they will be on. You've got to do a lot of investigative work, and because you've got such a narrow period of time until the auction date, it's that much more time pressure. So you've got to really essentially build your team way in advance over a period of time, but just so that you're on the high alert. So your mortgage broker, your planning consultant, an architect, um, any other professions that you think will be relevant. For example, a builder as well, of course. If you're going to do plans on being a development, or even a light refurbishment with the costs going high, you need to know what these costs are going to be. And little things like, for example, if you've been alerted in the special conditions that there's Japanese knotweed, so I had to do a little bit more investigation. Okay, I think Japanese knotweed can be fixed, but how much should I apportion for that to be eradicated if it was present when if I was successful? Those things take time in terms of building your network. That's why networking is so useful, I think. The more you do it on even platforms like this or in person, networking is so powerful, because not only are you learning from everybody else's experience, you're also learning to collaborate and help one another. And when the opportunity comes, then you can pick up the phone and say within 10 minutes, say, what do you think, Patricia, as an architect, do you think you're going to be able to split this property into another flat at the back? Just those 10 minutes, it's very useful. And then you just think, well, okay, if I'm successful, thank you, I'm going to hire you. Now let's get the ball rolling on this PD application if I'm successful. Um, it really is powerful to have that network in place before your auction. The other thing I was definitely going to recommend is, if nowadays everybody seems to be buying in a limited company, is make sure you set up that limited company well in advance. I mean, it's very quick to obviously set it up on Companies House, but if you need to speak to your accountant, do so in plenty of time, because it may take them a little bit longer to set it up. And if you've got a certain setup, a company structure they need to be aware of, that might take a little bit longer for maybe a solicitor to draft up. And obviously, you need to be able to notify the auction house in which name you're going to purchase the property, because it could be very costly to amend it after. If I say I'm going to buy it in Bushra Mohammed's name, but after I've won the auction lot, I say, well, I want to buy in Bushra Limited Company. They may charge you a lot of money to be able to amend that.
Wow. So again, just to reiterate, people, tap on Bushra's face. You can scroll down to the bottom of her bio. Her Instagram link is there. But, for people who are not on Clubhouse right now, so they might be listening on the podcast, just go to Bushra underscore property interest. So property interest is one word, and you will get to her Instagram. And her DMs are open.
Mm.
I heard that on Club. I'm thinking, what are they talking about? Apparently, it means anyway. Yeah, you can contact Bushra through her direct messaging system there. So now, Bushra, we've been talking about you and how you help buyers who want to go and buy in an auction. And in
Mm.
the beginning, you spoke about the different levels that you might be able to offer people. Do you want to just expand on those so that people know, and they can have that in mind
Yeah.
if they're interested in buying an auction?
Sure. I mean, I think it's important to point out, Patricia, that I don't just do auctions. I do all the other conveyancing transactions. So if you're buying, selling, or if you just need the ILA, we do offer those services as well at the firm. And obviously, auction legal packs is something that I've created as my niche as well. But going back to auctions, the levels obviously are going to be different. For example, my fee to a client who's purchasing a property up north at an auction for a guide price of 100K is not going to be the same as the developer who's purchasing a plot of land in Oxford with a guide price of 500,000. So what I'm trying to educate clients is the sooner you tell me the lot, I can review it and I can then discuss with you over the phone or send you an email and say, well, because it's for example, a just taking a commercial property, for example. So it's a commercial property. There's already a leasehold. Um, the lease is well in place. So I've got to then obviously not only read a freehold title, I'll have to read the leasehold title as well. So I will just explain to you, well, these are the other main factors that I believe you should be aware of, and my fee will be X. But then also I will let you know, well, I think my turnaround time will be 3-4 days, working days this week if I was to go ahead with it. And there's been several occasions where I've said, well, I'm so sorry, but I just don't think I've got capacity this week. But it will just be, well, just so that the client's aware, okay, every month, every week, there's another auction, just be a bit more aware, try and give me as much time as possible and notice so that I can just plan it out in my day, my week, and say, well, yes, I can take it on. Obviously, I want to help as many people as possible, but I'm only human at the end of the day, Patricia, so I can say just a portion, certain packs might take me a couple of hours, certain packs might take me a whole day to read because it might be a 50 document development land to review. So they obviously take that much longer and much more complicated to read.
Oh gosh, yes. And just in case anyone's listening to this and they're thinking, oh, there we go, solicitors, for 100,000 it's going to be less, for 500,000 it's going to be more. There is also a thing about risk. So
Hmm.
with the £500,000 property, the solicitor is taking more risk. And that
Of
is
course.
why their fee is going to be higher. So if you're thinking that, please just get that thought out of your head. Both of them will be very, very good value. And if you don't, get a solicitor to advise you, you are being penny wise and pound foolish.
Oh gosh. Now this is the other thing. It's another pet peeve of mine. And even though I'm an investor as well, and I've paid thousands to another solicitor to do my conveyancing transactions, is certain investors think that they can start haggling for fees. Now, we all love a bargain, I'm sure, in this
No way.
clubhouse room, whether I love a bargain on getting my kids something or is a bargain on a property. But just be very wary when you're starting to haggle and bargain with your solicitor. It's very difficult. And when for example, I sent a quote out to somebody last month, and I said it's going to cost, I think it was £1,100 to draft a new lease. And she came back and emailed and said, well, my other solicitors quoted £500. And I just think, well,
Really?
I'm not going to now beat you on this quote because this is how much our value is this, because we believe we're going to give you a good service, and basically that's our worth. I'm not going to start haggling down the price just to get your custom, quite frankly. So be very careful, I think. If you want to build a long-term relationship with your solicitor, and I'm sure everybody does because we're all in it for a long game, don't start off trying to haggle down prices. Obviously, if you've been with your solicitor for 20 plus years and you've given them 100 instructions, I'm sure they will do it anyway. Obviously, for my certain clients, if they are buying and selling um, and in one transaction and I've got something else going on for them, I will naturally say, yes, I'm going to deduct X amount for you. But not on your first phone call to me. Do not go out of your say, Bushra, can you half the amount? Because it's not going to happen, and then I will not be picking up the phone again to you, quite frankly.
Is less than half even, but then
It's ridiculous. I've had
that's not
about
even
three
true though, is
incidences
it?
like this now, Patricia, and it's quite astonishing. Now, you wouldn't go to your dentist and say, can you half the fee for doing your filling?
But then even Bushra, there's no way that any solicitor is drafting a new lease for £500.
I don't know.
It's just
I
no,
haven't
I
got the
can't see it
time to
happening.
say who's this list and how they justifying this, because it's not a competition I want to have.
Wow. Wow. Okay. So talking about you acting for sellers. So this is something that I've come across. Well, not because they've instructed me, no, but because I've heard about it, and I kind of like know people who've done it, where people have maybe they've bought a flat. Usually, it's a flat. So say the flat was a one bedroom. They've turned it into a two bedroom, and they're now trying to sell it, but they've not had any of the permissions that they needed to have. And when they're filling in their property forms, they've just said they've not done any works.
Ah,
Which when I heard, I said, oh no, wrong thing. But anyway, do you want to tell people why that's a bad idea, if you agree with me?
oh gosh, of course it's a bad idea. Well, first of all, if a client came to me and told me the truth, I would have a legal duty to say, well, we've got to now tell the other side. And if you don't want to let me tell the other side, then I'm going to have to cease acting for you, because I've got a duty to tell the truth under obviously my professional body. But if you don't tell me and then you fill out the forms, well, then I don't know, is the honest answer, isn't it? If I don't know and you've filled out the forms and and I've got to then draft the contract, send those forms, protocol forms to the other side, they're going to make inquiries, just like I would if I was on the other side. They're going to make inquiries and say, well, it's a two-bed flat. Where's the planning permission? Where's the building regs? And if I can't see it on the planning portal, um, you're going to either have to do something about it now or place an indemnity insurance or something to that effect.
Wow. And then what might happen if the sale goes through, but then subsequently the purchaser realizes that they've been misled and prices have dropped in the meantime?
Mm. Well, that's interesting, because I would then obviously, if I was acting for the seller, I would have to see what we were informed by the client and what we then told the other side. If we were told and we passed on exactly, no other information, then really we can't be held liable, because if the client didn't tell us and we don't know any more than we've been told, and if the buyer solicitor did all the inquiries and we provided them with all the documentation, the answers you have, when you exchange contracts, it means that you should have been satisfied with all the documentation, all the inquiries and replies you've received. Then I or the firm can't be obviously responsible in that scenario. If your property's price has dropped since then, I think that would be something that we'd have to get, a partner or some other professional body involved in that sense. But fortunately, touch wood, we've not had that scenario.
But do you think the seller might be liable to the buyer in such an instance?
I think in that instance, if it was clear misrepresentation, and if we already knew, and so if so, are you saying that the seller client
No,
told
no, no.
us?
The seller client didn't tell you, but the seller client lied in the documentation, and so the buyer um, accepted what was in the
Oh, yes, yes. So
documentation.
then, if
Yes,
we wouldn't be liable, but if it was to go further down the route, it is possible, of course, the seller would be liable for misrepresentation, and that's just a whole completely different area of law in itself.
exactly. So, people, if you're listening to this and you've done that sort of thing, do not lie to your solicitors. Do not lie in the
Oh gosh,
paperwork.
yeah,
Do everything that you ought to be doing, and just don't lie, because it can come back and bite you.
yes.
Um,
Now that's obviously not as obvious, but if you're looking at auctions, be very wary what you're reading. Just an example, going back to the property I was bidding on, the clients clearly did a lot of work to the house, but there was no planning documentation, either in the legal pack or on the planning portal. So obviously, you need to be aware that the other side may not be lying, but they may not just be forthcoming with documentation, and you just need to be aware of what documents you also need as well.
Oh, Bushra, do you know, I've learned a lot today, and I hope that people in the room have also learned a lot. Honestly, contact Bushra. You want to buy, you want to sell, contact Bushra, because you want to do any of those things, you will need a solicitor. And it's just been my pleasure. I am delighted that you came, that you accepted my invitation, and that you have shared so much value with us.
Oh,
Um,
my pleasure.
so today, today's recording is going to be on Clubhouse. It will be under my profile, under Bushra's profile, and under the club profile. So the club is Maximising Property Pound, 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 because Clubhouse didn't allow me to write values. I'd run out of characters. So I thought, okay, pound, pound, pound is just as good. So it'll be in those three places. But Wednesday week, so on Wednesday coming, this will also be released as a podcast. And next week, we have got whom I call an Insta guru, Kazim Ali Balogun. He's coming next week. So he's grown his Instagram from nothing, well, effectively nothing, maybe like tens or 100 to 50,000 in just over a year. So probably 12 months or 18 months, something like that. Anyway,
Oh, wow.
yeah, I know. Absolutely amazing. So I'll find out a bit more next week. And if you're interested, come here, come and listen. But Bushra, thank you so much for doing this with me. And
My pleasure.
if you're not already following Bushra, tap on her face and follow her. Thank you, guys.